Imagine a world where enlightenment is not a memory of the past, but a promise of the future, where the idea of a fully awakened being walking among us isn't just a myth, but a prophecy waiting to unfold. Not with fire and brimstone, not with war and conquest, but with a calm presence, a radiant kindness, and wisdom so clear it cuts through confusion like sunlight through fog. This isn't a fantasy from a sci-fi novel. It's an ancient whisper from Buddhist tradition, echoing across time. It speaks of someone not yet here, but very much real, a being named Maitreya. Now, before you wonder whether this is just another spiritual bedtime story, think about this. The world has always looked for figures of transformation, someone to guide us when things feel too heavy. In the Buddhist world, that someone is Maitreya, a name that means the loving one. But he's not just some vague concept floating in scriptures or old chants. He's a living idea, a symbol of everything we hope to become, and maybe, just maybe, something or someone that will truly arrive one day. To understand Maitreya, we have to rewind the story. Long before cell phones, long before airplanes, even before the printing press or telescopes, there was a man named Siddhartha Gautama, the original Buddha, the one who woke up. He lived around 500 BCE in ancient India, and his teachings formed the roots of what would become one of the world's most profound spiritual traditions. But even he, in his wisdom, said this: "I am not the first Buddha who came upon earth, nor shall I be the last. In due time, another Buddha will arise in the world, a holy one, a supremely enlightened one, endowed with wisdom and conduct, knowing the universe." That future Buddha is Maitreya. The idea of future Buddhas didn't start with some fantasy. It was already part of ancient Indian thought, a cycle of awakening that moves through time. But Maitreya wasn't just another name on the list. He became the central figure of hope, the one people looked toward when the light felt far away. As Buddhism spread beyond India to China, Korea, Japan, Tibet, so did the legend of Maitreya. Each place added its own colors to the image. Artists sculpted him into statues, painted him onto walls, imagined his arrival in dreams and poems. Some saw him seated in heaven, waiting patiently. Others believed he was already among us, hidden in plain sight. That's the thing about prophecy. It's not about precision, it's about preparation. Maitreya was never meant to be a countdown clock. He was a spiritual reminder, a cosmic North Star pointing toward what's possible, even in a broken world. So who is this being we place so much faith in? Picture someone with warmth that radiates like the sun, but without burning. Someone whose presence calms you without speaking a word. Maitreya, according to Buddhist belief, resides right now in a realm called Tushita. It's not a paradise of luxury, it's a realm of peace, a place for those preparing to become Buddhas. Maitreya waits there, not in idleness, but in readiness. He studies, he reflects, he watches, and when the time is right, when the teachings of the historical Buddha have faded into myths, when the world needs clarity more than ever, he will descend. But he won't come with armies. He won't demand worship. He won't bring fear. He'll come as a teacher, a guide, a new Buddha for a new age. His mission will be simple: to turn the wheel of Dharma once again, to reintroduce wisdom where confusion has taken root, to show a path where people see none. According to the ancient texts, he'll walk among us, speak to us, and in doing so, awaken millions. His presence will ignite a spiritual renewal so vast that it will feel like a golden dawn after an eternal night. Now here's where the story gets fascinating. Different Buddhist traditions interpret Maitreya in unique ways. In Theravada Buddhism, he's acknowledged as the next Buddha, but isn't the focus of daily practice. The message there is, yes, he'll come, But for now, work on your own awakening. In Mahayana Buddhism, he becomes much more central. He's seen as a bodhisattva, a being who could have become enlightened already but chose to wait, to delay his own nirvana so that others might reach it first. That's love. That's selflessness on a scale most of us can barely imagine. In Vajrayana, the esoteric path found mainly in Tibet, Maitreya's presence is not just future-oriented. He's accessible now. Through visualization, mantra, meditation, you can connect with him today. Feel his energy. Let his presence inspire transformation, not someday, but right now. And it doesn't stop there. In Chinese traditions, the popular image of the laughing Buddha, the one with the big belly and even bigger smile, is sometimes associated with Maitreya, a symbol of joy, generosity, and ease. In Japan, some religious movements in recent centuries have gone even further, claiming their founders were incarnations of Maitreya himself. Across cultures and centuries, the image of this future Buddha has never stayed static. He's evolved, adapted, taken on forms that speak to the hearts of different people in different times. But what does all of this mean for us? Because let's be honest, 5.6 billion years from now, which is what some texts estimate as the time of his return, isn't exactly marked on our calendar. If Maitreya isn't coming tomorrow, why care? Why does he matter? Because he's more than a timeline. He's an archetype, a reminder that wisdom is never gone. It just sleeps. And when the time is right, it wakes up again. In you, in me, in all of us. That's the real power of Maitreya. Not in the lightning or the levitation or the miracle birth some prophecies describe, but in the simple idea that kindness will rise again, that compassion hasn't left the building, that when the world is tired, when people have forgotten how to live with care, someone will remember and remind us. There's an old legend that says, when Maitreya comes, he'll teach with such clarity that even those who never thought themselves spiritual will understand. His words will cut through illusion like a blade through mist. He won't speak in riddles. He'll speak in truth so direct, they'll feel like they have always been with us. And maybe they have. Because Maitreya isn't just a figure, he's a mirror. When you hear his name, when you picture his gentle smile, what you're really seeing is your own potential reflected back at you. He's not coming to save you. He's coming to remind you that you can save yourself. That the future isn't just something that happens to us. It's something we shape, moment by moment, with our choices. That's why the legend of Maitreya matters. Not because we expect him to knock on our door someday, but because he already does in the form of a stranger's kindness, a child's laughter, the quiet wisdom of a friend who listens more than they speak. Every time you choose patience over anger, clarity over confusion, love over fear, you're walking his path. You're becoming the student before the teacher arrives. And maybe that's the real secret. Maybe Maitreya won't come when the world is ready. Maybe he'll come when we are. It's strange how the future can feel both impossibly far and intimately close. That's what Maitreya represents to so many people across cultures. Not just a beacon on some cosmic timeline, but a quiet voice we can already hear if we learn to listen. He isn't just a future Buddha riding in on a cloud of prophecies. He's also the presence inside us, urging us to wake up, to act, to live with intention. If you step back and look at how this figure has woven his way through centuries of belief, it's almost like he's been quietly shaping history, not by appearing, but by being awaited. Whole movements have been born from the hope of his arrival. In moments of darkness, during political upheaval or cultural decline, people haven't just looked up to the heavens, they've looked forward. They found strength in knowing that when humanity forgets how to be kind, someone will eventually remind us. In China, stories of Maitreya stirred more than spiritual reflection. They sparked action. Secret societies formed around his name. Peasants rose up, chanting his prophecy like a battle cry. To them, Maitreya wasn't just a symbol, he was the future incarnate, a future they wanted now. They believed the world had become too cruel, too corrupt, too broken, and Maitreya was their cosmic correction. Even if he hadn't arrived yet, they wanted to be ready. Or perhaps they hoped to bring him sooner by creating the conditions for his return. In politics, his name has been whispered behind curtains and spoken boldly in speeches. Leaders throughout history have tried to link themselves to his image, not because they were enlightened, but because they knew the power of being associated with the ultimate redeemer. To be seen as the one who leads people out of suffering, even symbolically, is to step into a powerful role. It's like borrowing the glow of a star and hoping people won't notice it isn't yours. But Maitreya's influence hasn't stopped at dusty scrolls or revolutionary cries. He's slipped quietly into places we never expect, into stories, into songs, into pop culture. Some filmmakers and writers have even built entire characters around the idea of the awakened one to come. Not always named Maitreya, not always wearing robes or quoting sutras, but the themes are unmistakable. A guide, a teacher, a figure who emerges when all seems lost and leads people back to something true. Take the movies that hint at a figure who sees through the illusion of the world, who awakens and helps others do the same. The kind of character who says, "You've forgotten what matters. Let me show you again." It's not just entertainment, it's echo. An echo of something ancient that still hums beneath the surface of our collective imagination. Even music has caught the rhythm. Artists from distant cultures, different languages, have found themselves inspired by the idea of a future Buddha. Songs that blend spiritual longing with modern beats. Lyrics that speak of change, of hope, of waking up. You'll hear it in the verses if you know what to listen for. Then there's fashion, a strange thing maybe to associate with a spiritual being. But the world is full of symbols, and symbols have a way of showing up in unexpected places. You might see someone wearing a shirt with a peaceful figure on it, not knowing that the smiling face printed across their chest is part of a prophecy thousands of years old. Or a necklace bearing a charm that means loving kindness, crafted not as a trend, but as a silent nod to something deeper. Social media hasn't missed him either. Scroll long enough and you might stumble on a meme. Funny, yes, but layered with meaning. Still waiting on Maitreya, like, followed by a picture of someone aging on a bench. It's humor, sure, but underneath that is a kind of sacred restlessness. A collective question, when will things finally change? But not everyone's laughing. For some, Maitreya isn't a metaphor or a meme. He's real, and he's here. Or at least that's what they believe. There are groups, spiritual movements, often tucked away from the mainstream, that claim Maitreya walks among us now, disguised, hidden, waiting, watching. Maybe he's a teacher in some quiet village. Maybe he's working at a bookstore or a cafe. Maybe he's already speaking and we just haven't learned how to hear him yet. Whether that's true or not isn't the point. What matters is what it says about us, that we want to believe someone like him could be here already, that we're not alone in our longing for clarity, for compassion, for a better kind of wisdom. That somewhere, maybe just around the corner, someone is embodying what we all wish we could be. Because when you look at what Maitreya stands for, it's not mystery or magic, it's love, it's awareness. It's the ability to hold suffering in one hand and healing in the other, and know that both are part of the journey. That's why his story doesn't fade, why it keeps adapting, because we don't outgrow the need for compassion. We just forget it sometimes. And then someone or some story reminds us. One of the most powerful aspects of Maitreya's legend is the idea that his return won't be subtle. When he arrives, the world will know. The texts speak of signs, of unmistakable features, of miracles that bend reality itself. Fire and water flowing from his body, words that echo across cities without a microphone. Light radiating from his form, not metaphorically, but visibly. A being who is more than just enlightened. A being who is illumination itself. But what if those miracles aren't just physical? What if the real miracle is the shift that happens inside us when we truly hear his message? A moment where everything you thought you understood about life rearranges itself. Not with confusion, but with clarity. A realization that cuts through all your assumptions and leaves behind only truth. That moment, that awakening, that's what his arrival represents. And it's not just for monks on mountains or mystics in temples. It's for anyone with a heart that aches for peace and a mind that yearns for understanding. The prophecies say that he'll teach not just a continuation of old truths, but a new turning of the wheel, a second revolution in wisdom, an update that speaks to the time, the culture, the chaos of the moment, like someone showing up with the perfect words at the perfect time, not vague, not cryptic, but direct, healing, transformative. Imagine being in a crowd of thousands, listening as this being speaks. No fancy language, just pure, clear guidance, not demanding belief, but offering insight so honest it breaks you open in the best way. That's the scene painted in many Buddhist texts, a massive gathering, a new teaching, a ripple effect that spreads across the world, not through war, not through power, but through understanding. And yet, even if we never witness that scene with our own eyes, the idea of it changes us. It calls something out of us. Because Maitreya is not a distant deity. He's not some far-off fantasy. He's a possibility, a question, an invitation. What if you didn't have to wait for him to arrive? What if you could start walking that path now? You don't need to live in a monastery or chant ancient verses to begin. It can start when you choose to listen with patience, when you treat someone gently even when you're angry, when you choose kindness over ego. These are not small things. They are the seeds of something immense. In Buddhist tradition, they speak of planting merit. Actions done not for reward, but for the nourishment of your soul and the good of others. Each act of generosity, each moment of mindfulness, each time you choose peace over pride, these are the footsteps that lead you closer to what Maitreya embodies. Some even believe that those who cultivate these virtues now might be reborn in the time of his teaching, that when he does arrive, they'll be ready, not by accident, but by effort. It's a powerful thought, isn't it? That you can live your way into a better lifetime, that by choosing compassion today, you're preparing your soul for the teachings of tomorrow. That's why the legend of Maitreya doesn't ask for belief. It asks for action, for curiosity, for an open heart. And maybe that's all enlightenment has ever asked. There's something quietly thrilling about the idea that the future could hold not just technological marvels or political shifts, but a complete awakening. Not an invention, not a revolution in machinery, but a revolution in how we see ourselves, each other, and the world. That's what Maitreya represents. And what's wild is how many different forms that revolution could take, depending on who you ask. Because across the Buddhist world, everyone sees Maitreya a little differently. And that's not a flaw, it's a feature. The idea of the future Buddha has stretched and shifted like a song passed down through generations, each culture adding its own verse, its own rhythm, its own flavor. And the result? A tapestry of interpretations. A reflection of what different communities have needed most in different times. In some traditions, Maitreya is already taking shape, not here walking the streets, but in a realm just above ours. Tushita heaven, not the kind of heaven with golden gates and choirs. This place is quiet, Still, a realm where beings prepare, where future Buddhas study and reflect before they descend. That's where Maitreya resides now, according to many texts. Watching, waiting, not idly, but mindfully. A kind of cosmic meditation in progress until the moment arrives to step back into our world. What makes this so fascinating is that Maitreya, in this vision, is not rushing. He's not counting down the days like a celebrity prepping for a big entrance. He's biding his time until the teachings of the last Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, have faded, until the Dharma has become just a word in old books. When people forget how to be kind, when wisdom becomes rare, that's when he'll come. Not a moment sooner. It's not a punishment. It's a promise. When things get dark, someone will bring light. But other traditions paint a more mystical picture. They say Maitreya isn't just watching us from afar. He's here, in some form, maybe not recognized, maybe not even aware of his full role yet, but among us, walking the same streets, breathing the same air, a presence that, when the time is right, will activate, awaken, and begin to teach in a way we've never seen before. Some even believe you can connect with him now, not metaphorically, but energetically, through prayer, through meditation, through deep devotion and mental clarity. That in certain moments, if your mind is quiet enough, open enough, you can feel his presence. Not as a fantasy, but as a kind of spiritual current, flowing through your awareness. There are stories of people who claim to have seen him, in dreams, in visions, in quiet moments when the world falls away and only peace remains. Some describe him as shining, others as soft-spoken, always kind, always deeply present. And whether or not these encounters are literal doesn't matter. What matters is that they're real to the people experiencing them, and those experiences change them. That's the secret, isn't it? Transformation doesn't always need proof. It just needs a shift, a new lens, a realization. And that's exactly what Maitreya is meant to inspire. Across Tibet, for example, you'll find his image carved into mountainsides, painted into temples. His smile is serene, his hands often positioned in the teaching gesture, ready to share wisdom not yet spoken. In places where life is hard, where winters bite and resources are thin, people still find warmth in his presence, a promise carved into stone. In China, during dynastic eras marked by chaos and collapse, Maitreya became a symbol of rebellion and renewal. Secret societies invoked his name not to wait, but to act, to spark change, to reclaim a vision of justice and wisdom they felt had been lost. Even in modern urban temples, you might see statues of the Laughing Buddha, that big belly, that contagious grin. It's a joyful image, easy to recognize and often misunderstood. Many don't realize that this figure is sometimes interpreted as an incarnation of Maitreya. Not fearsome, not solemn, but joyful, radiating the simple kind of happiness that comes from knowing all things change, and goodness always finds a way back in. It's not just religion that's carried him forward either. Artists have etched him into scrolls. Writers have written him into stories, ikso. Even in modern forms, manga, comics, film, you'll find hints of Maitreya hidden in plain sight. A hero who brings peace not by fighting, but by understanding. A leader who doesn't seek power, but gently hands it back to the people through knowledge. He's become a muse for creators across mediums, a whisper of hope that finds its way into paint, into verse, into code. Digital artists draw him floating over futuristic cities, guiding a world lost in its own ambition. Musicians reference him in lyrics about peace, transformation, or divine timing. Even game developers have slipped versions of him into characters, guardians of wisdom, unlockers of ancient truths. That's how you know an idea has power, when it leaves the temple and walks into the world, when it stops being confined to ritual and starts living in imagination. Maitreya has done exactly that, and it doesn't stop at art. Social movements, too, have drawn on his image. In times of despair, war, oppression, natural disasters, you'll find banners raised in his name. Not because people believe he'll drop from the sky and fix everything, but because invoking him reminds us of what we're capable of. He is, after all, the embodiment of loving kindness. Not the soft kind, but the powerful kind. The kind that changes systems. The kind that inspires revolutions, not with violence, but with vision. Even the environmental movement has felt his influence. In a world burning with greed and short-sightedness, the idea of a being who places compassion at the center of existence, it's no wonder people turn to him for inspiration. Some see his arrival as linked to a renewed harmony between humans and nature, not as a savior, but as a catalyst, a reminder that we don't own the earth, we are part of it, that healing begins with reverence. And now, in this strange age of technology, where connection is instant but understanding often feels distant, Maitreya's name echoes in new ways. Online communities form around his teachings. People explore his story not through pilgrimage, but through screens. They read, they question, they share interpretations, they post memes. It might seem trivial, but it's not. It's evolution, the spirit of a teaching adapting to a new world. Because maybe that's how Maitreya shows up, through whatever medium we're willing to receive him. Not just in stone, not just in scrolls, but in conversation, in art, in code, in thought. There are those who say that when he comes, it won't be with thunder or flame. It will be with a voice so calm it makes chaos quiet. With a presence so grounded, it pulls us all back to ourselves. He won't need to convince us. We'll recognize him by what we feel. A strange sensation like coming home. Like remembering something we never realized we'd forgotten. But again, maybe we don't have to wait. Maybe Maitreya's arrival isn't just an external event. Maybe it's a state of mind, a level of awareness you reach when you stop reacting and start responding, when you stop chasing and start listening, when you let go of who you think you need to be and simply return to what is. What if his arrival isn't about time at all? What if it's about readiness? That's a different kind of prophecy, one that puts the power not in the stars but in your own heart. It asks you not will he come, but will you be ready when he does? And even more importantly, are you ready now? Because the teachings he will bring are not new. They're ancient truths wrapped in new language, wisdom rediscovered, compassion rekindled, clarity restored. The wheel of Dharma turns again and again, not because someone turns it for us, but because we remember how to turn it ourselves. And in that remembering, we become part of the prophecy, not just spectators, but participants, not just listeners, but living proof. There's a kind of stillness that comes when you sit with the thought of a world guided by wisdom instead of fear. That stillness doesn't come from pretending everything's fine. It comes from remembering that even in the middle of chaos, clarity is possible. And that's the feeling many people carry when they think about Maitreya. Not a dramatic savior storming in to tear down the broken parts of the world, but a calm, unwavering presence who reminds us that things can be rebuilt, gently, honestly, and together. The prophecies around Maitreya don't just describe what he will teach, or how he'll look, or even when he'll come. They describe a world in crisis, crumbling under the weight of its own confusion. A world where the teachings of the last Buddha have become distant echoes, where the Dharma is forgotten or remembered only in fragments. People are suffering, not just from poverty or war, but from disconnection, from the loss of meaning. And then, in the midst of that spiritual drought, he arrives. But this isn't just an event. It's not a fixed date on a calendar. It's a turning point in consciousness. Some texts describe it in vivid terms. There's something ancient and unshakable inside the human spirit that longs for the return of someone who will make things whole again. Not necessarily through magic or force, but through deep presence. A being who won't just give us new rules or philosophies, but who will help us see what's already inside us with such clarity that it changes everything. That's what Maitreya represents. He is not a warrior, not a ruler, not a symbol of domination. He is a mirror for the divine within us that we've forgotten. And the more we understand his role, not just as a future Buddha, but as a living possibility, the more we realize this story is not about waiting. It's about preparing, and not in some abstract spiritual checklist way, but in the everyday moments, in how we breathe, in how we speak, in how we choose to show up when we'd rather shrink away. In ancient Buddhist texts, it is said that Maitreya will not come in a time of peace and order, but in a time when confusion rules the day. When wisdom is rare and the teachings of the historical Buddha have become dusty concepts. In a world bloated with information but starving for understanding, that's when he comes. But he won't arrive to criticize or shame. He'll come quietly, powerfully, fully awake, and ready to meet us where we are. Not to demand reverence, but to remind us of what's possible. His teachings, they say, will not be difficult to understand. He won't speak in riddles. He won't hide meaning behind metaphors. His words will be direct, piercing, and yet so gentle that the soul relaxes in their presence. Imagine that. Truth that doesn't strike, but heals. Words that don't divide, but unite. Wisdom that doesn't lift one person above another, but brings all to the same level ground of humanity. Maitreya's Dharma, the truth he will teach, is not something entirely new, but something renewed. Something we've always had access to, but have forgotten how to touch. And that forgetting, that is the real suffering, because it leads to all other kinds of pain. The pain of disconnection, of thinking we are alone. The pain of feeling unseen in a world that moves too fast. The pain of mistaking achievement for peace and status for worth. These are the wounds he's coming to address. And he won't do it with sermons that float above real life. He'll do it by walking among people, not hovering, not separating himself, but moving through the world like water, seamlessly, lovingly, naturally. He will teach not just from temples or mountains, but from streets and homes, in conversations and silences. He'll teach in how he listens, in how he notices, in how he stays still when others would rush. His presence alone, they say, will transform the energy around him. People will feel calmer, lighter, not because he takes their burdens from them, but because his presence reminds them how to carry those burdens differently, more gently, more wisely. He'll remind us that pain is not proof of failure, it's proof of depth. And in that teaching, a new kind of humanity will begin to form, not because people are forced to change, but because they want to. Because they finally remember that joy isn't shallow, that love isn't weakness, that truth doesn't have to hurt to be real. The golden age that Maitreya is said to usher in is not about perfection. It's about presence, a time when people don't seek to dominate the earth, but to care for it. When learning is not about accumulating facts, but about understanding life. When the elderly are honored not because of tradition, but because their wisdom is seen as sacred. When children grow up knowing that their worth is not tied to performance, but to their existence. This isn't fantasy, it's possibility. But it begins with choice. The choice to soften when you could harden. The choice to listen when you could dismiss. The choice to extend compassion even when the world says it's naive. These small decisions, multiplied across millions, are what shape the atmosphere Maitreya will step into. That's why preparation doesn't look like waiting with folded hands. It looks like waking up every day and asking, how can I love better today? How can I understand more deeply? It looks like noticing the ways we hurt each other out of our own pain in choosing to end the cycle. That is the soil in which his teachings will take root. And the beauty is, he's not coming to be above us. He's coming to walk with us, to teach us how to carry the light we've buried, to remind us that we don't need to become someone else. We need to return to who we really are. And when we do, we become part of his teaching, part of his work. We become the proof that awakening is not rare, it's natural. That enlightenment is not escape, it's full presence. That truth is not a weapon, it's a mirror. And in that mirror, we begin to see ourselves not as broken, but as blooming. Not as too late, but right on time. There are traditions that say Maitreya will stay on this earth for thousands of years, not just to teach, but to anchor something, to hold a vibration so steady, so grounded, that it rewires the very fabric of how we live together. Not by force, by resonance. That's what real power does. It doesn't impose, it inspires. It doesn't conquer, it connects. And when people gather around Maitreya, not just in body, but in spirit, they'll begin to change without even trying to. Their habits will shift, their language will soften, their fears will lose grip. Not because someone told them to change, but because something inside them felt safe enough to. And that is what he brings, a sense of safety so profound, it creates space for healing. A love so unconditional, it becomes permission to grow. Not to perform, not to impress, just to grow. And the most radical part? This transformation doesn't require you to believe in him as a deity. You don't need to chant his name or memorize his stories. You only need to listen to the silence inside yourself that's been whispering the same truths all along. That you are not alone, that you are not broken, that love is still possible, and peace is not a myth, it's a muscle. At Wisdom's Solace, we believe in telling stories not to escape reality, but to deepen our engagement with it. The story of Maitreya is one of the most powerful, not because it gives us a hero to worship, but because it gives us a path to walk, a direction to lean toward, a reminder that even in the most uncertain times, there is a wisdom waiting to emerge from within. And that wisdom does not belong to one man. It belongs to all of us. Maitreya's presence when it arrives will not feel like an interruption. It will feel like a homecoming, like something we've always known but forgot, like the return of a truth that never left, only waited. So maybe the question isn't, when will he come? Maybe the question is, how will you meet him when he does? Will you recognize him? Not just by his words, but by what you feel in his presence. Will you be ready to sit down, listen, and let go of the stories that no longer serve you? Will you be willing to learn again, as if for the first time? Because that's the kind of readiness this future asks for. Not doctrinal, but emotional. Not scripted, but sincere. And maybe you're already closer than you think. And those who walk the world with Maitreya in mind tend to walk differently. Softer, slower, with more care. They treat strangers with warmth. They listen more than they speak. Not because they're perfect, but because they're practicing. That's all this really is, a practice in becoming. Becoming the kind of person who would be ready to sit at the feet of a being like Maitreya. At Wisdom's Solace, we often explore these threads of meaning, not because we claim to have the answers, but because we believe the questions are sacred. What would it look like to live in alignment with Maitreya's teachings before he even speaks them? What would it feel like to treat every moment as part of your preparation? It might start small. You're standing in line. You're frustrated. Someone cuts in front of you. Your usual reaction rises. Annoyance, judgment, maybe even the urge to say something sharp. But then something shifts. You pause. You remember this is the practice. You don't know that person's story, and suddenly the reaction dissolves. Not because you've forced yourself into silence, but because you've chosen peace. In that moment, you are not just honoring Maitreya, you are embodying him. Or maybe you're having a difficult conversation. Someone's hurt you. Your pride is wounded. Everything in you wants to argue, to win. But you take a breath. You listen, not just to their words, but to their pain underneath. You speak not to defend, but to understand. That's Maitreya, speaking through your voice. This isn't about perfection, it's about presence. The more present you are, the more you create the very world Maitreya is said to bring. One where understanding is more important than being right, where kindness doesn't need a reason, where love doesn't have to be earned. In some stories, Maitreya is said to appear during a massive global gathering, a spiritual event so immense that people from every corner of the world come to hear him speak. No microphones, no live streams, just one voice carrying through the hearts of billions. And what he shares, they say, will not be complex. It will be simple, stunningly simple, a kind of clarity we forgot we needed. He won't talk in riddles. He won't argue with philosophers. He'll speak in the language of life, of love, of loss, of joy. The kind of wisdom that cuts through intellectual debate and lands straight in the soul. It's easy to think of such a moment as myth, a fantasy. But maybe we don't need to take it literally to understand its power. Maybe the idea of that gathering isn't about numbers. Maybe it's about moments, small, private awakenings. A mother who finally forgives herself. A child who learns to trust again. A man who realizes his value isn't in his paycheck, but in how he treats others. Each of these is a teaching. Each of these is a miracle. And in this way, Maitreya's return becomes less about one grand arrival and more about countless small ones. Drops of awakening falling across the world until the soil is soft enough for something new to grow. That's what the prophecy is really pointing toward. Not spectacle, not superstition, but transformation, not out there. Here, in the way we live, the way we love, the way we remember who we are beneath the noise. That's the invitation, and it's been open for centuries. Not everyone will accept it. Not everyone will understand. And that's okay. This path isn't about convincing, it's about becoming. And becoming takes time. It's not about enlightenment in a flash of light. It's about showing up again and again, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. That's what Maitreya stands for. Not perfection delivered from above, but the reminder that awakening is always possible, even in the messiest of moments, even in you, even in me. That's the real return. And it doesn't need fireworks to be profound. It just needs one quiet moment of truth and the willingness to follow where it leads. There's something deeply humbling about realizing that even enlightenment is not an individual journey. We often imagine the Buddha sitting alone beneath a tree, eyes closed, untouched by the world. But that's only one part of the story. The deeper truth is that awakening ripples outward. It doesn't stop with the one who wakes up. It spreads, like a soft tide rolling toward every shore. And when we think about Maitreya, the future Buddha, that ripple becomes a wave. This isn't just about one enlightened being descending from a higher plane to dispense truth like spiritual candy. It's about a movement of consciousness, a return to something we once knew but forgot. Maitreya's story isn't just his, it's ours. A reflection of our longing, our potential, our hidden strength. When people describe his arrival, they often mention miracles, spectacular ones. He'll shine with supernatural light. He'll perform feats that make the laws of physics look like suggestions. He'll be able to speak to crowds without raising his voice, and everyone will hear him in their own language. Some accounts say he'll radiate fire from one part of his body, water from another. Not because he needs to show off, but because his presence will be in harmony with all elements. But beneath the spectacle lies something more powerful, the wisdom he brings. You see, miracles get attention, but wisdom changes lives. And what Maitreya is meant to share isn't just poetic or philosophical, it's transformational. Teaching's not just about what is, but how to live, how to suffer less, how to love more, how to find freedom, not in escape, but in full engagement with life. The kind of wisdom he'll offer won't be about rules and dogma. It will be about reality, seeing it as it truly is, not filtered through fear or ego, but clear, direct, and healing. One of the core themes in his prophesied teachings is loving kindness, not just as a virtue, but as a force, a power more enduring than any weapon, a way of being that rewires how we see the world. In the teachings of the past, loving kindness has always played a central role, but Maitreya is said to take it to a new level. Not as an idea, but as a lived experience, something that radiates from him and wakes it up in others. Imagine encountering someone who looks at you with such pure compassion that every wall you've built inside yourself begins to melt. Not because you're being judged, but because you're finally being seen, fully, without condition, without expectation. That kind of presence is rare, but it's what Maitreya embodies. It's not just about emotional comfort, it's about remembering who you are when you strip away the noise, the mistakes, the pain, the masks. What's left beneath all that is something holy, and he's here to show us how to return to it. But what does that mean for us now? We're not sitting in front of him. We're not hearing his voice echo across mountains. But maybe we are. Maybe his teachings are already here, not as lectures, but as life. Maybe every time you choose to be kind when it's easier to be cruel, you're walking in his light. Maybe when you forgive someone who doesn't deserve it, because you understand that healing matters more than revenge, you're echoing the very wisdom he'll one day share. The miracles are real, but maybe they're already happening, not in grand displays, but in subtle shifts. The kind you feel in your chest when you decide to grow instead of hide, to love instead of control, to speak gently instead of lash out. That's what makes Maitreya such a powerful figure. He's not asking for belief, he's offering inspiration. Sometimes the most powerful revolutions don't begin with noise. They begin in silence. They begin when someone, somewhere, finally pauses long enough to ask a different kind of question. Not how do I win, or how do I survive, but what would love do right now? And that question, that simple, quiet shift in thought, has the power to change everything. That's the kind of transformation Maitreya is meant to ignite. Not just global, not just historical, but deeply personal. He's not coming to take away our problems. He's coming to show us a different way of living with them. To reveal that the real battle was never out there. It's always been in here, inside us, where our thoughts grow wild and our hearts grow tired. But in that same inner space lives the seed of awakening, the hidden potential that has waited lifetimes for a reason to bloom. Maitreya doesn't arrive to give us that seed. He arrives to shine the light that helps it grow. And the people who recognize him won't be those with the most education or the most spiritual practice. They'll be the ones who are most open, most present, most willing to let go of what they think they know. Because the wisdom he brings will not flatter the ego. It won't elevate intellect. It will humble us in the most beautiful way. It will break open the hardened places. It will pull tenderness out of us we didn't even know we had. His truth will feel less like new information and more like a deep remembering. Like a door that opens to a place you never realized was always part of you. And once it opens, you don't go back. You can't unlearn compassion. You can't unsee the interconnectedness of all things. You can't unknow that your joy and someone else's pain are more closely woven than you ever imagined. Some say Maitreya's voice will be like thunder, heard across mountains and oceans. Others say it will be like a breeze, barely louder than a whisper, but impossible to ignore. Maybe it will be both. Maybe he will speak loudly, not with volume, but with clarity. Maybe his words will carry because they come from a place that no distortion can reach. Because truth, when it's spoken from presence, doesn't need to be shouted. It settles into the soul like a stone dropped in still water. And it echoes over time, through generations, through choices. And what he teaches won't be abstract. It won't float above daily life. It will be practical, grounded. The kind of guidance that affects how you speak to your partner when you're upset, how you treat your body, how you raise your kids, how you walk through the world with grace, even when it's heavy. Because enlightenment isn't an escape. It's an invitation to be fully here, in the mess, in the beauty, in the heartbreak and the healing. Maitreya will show us that we don't find peace by running from life. We find it by leaning into it, with eyes open and heart steady. There will be resistance. Not everyone will welcome his presence. That much is certain. Some will be afraid of what he represents, because when real truth enters a room, it threatens anything built on illusion. People who profit from fear won't want him here. People who build empires on separation, on shame, on control, they'll feel him as a disruption, and they'll try to twist his message. They'll try to turn him into something he's not. That's always been the way of things. But he won't fight them. He won't argue. He'll remain rooted in what is real, because truth doesn't panic when it's misunderstood. It simply waits to be recognized, and slowly it will be. Not through debate, but through experience, through the way people begin to change. Not because they're told to, but because they want to. Because in his presence, the weight they've carried for years will finally feel optional. Because in his words, they'll hear an echo of the home they've always longed for. And that kind of change can't be coerced. It has to rise from within. That's why Maitreya is more than a teacher. He's a gardener. He won't force growth. He'll create conditions where growth becomes inevitable. And what will the world look like when it begins to grow in that direction? It won't be perfect. It won't be free of challenge, but it will be more honest, more human, more alive. Systems will begin to shift, not because of policy alone, but because of consciousness. Education will focus less on competition and more on connection. Healthcare will value not just the body, but the mind and the soul. Justice will mean restoration, not revenge. Even the way we build cities will change. Spaces will be designed not just for profit, but for peace, for beauty, for belonging. But again, it won't happen overnight. This is not a prophecy of instant salvation. It's a slow unfolding, a ripple effect that begins in the smallest places, in conversations, in relationships, in the quiet choices that most people never see. That's how a golden age begins, not with applause, but with awareness.